Students, in lesson 3.8, the essential question at the top of the page says, how can you use place value to help you add decimals? So today we're going to add decimals. In the previous two lessons, we worked on using manipulatives to draw pictures to help us figure out how to subtract decimals and add decimals. So in lesson 3.8, we are going to put those skills together that we did in the previous two lessons. However, we're going to talk about the procedural way of how we can use place value, which we've been looping through this whole chapter, to help us add decimals. So let's start at the top with the unlock the problem real world. Henry recorded the amount of rain that fell over 2 hours. In the first hour, Henry measured 2 3/500 centimeters of rain. In the second hour, he measured 1 8200 centimeters of rain. Henry estimated that about 4 centimeters of rain fell in 2 hours. What is the total amount of rain that fell? How can you use this estimate to decide if your answer is reasonable? So right off the back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle 4 centimeters, and I'm going to write down that that's my estimate, because that's what I can go back to. That's my benchmark for me to know if my answer makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add the two numbers. So first, we're going to add the hundreds. So if I look over here and I make a little line underneath the hundreds in purple, I have to add 5 hundreds plus 2 hundreds, which would be 7 hundreds. Then add the tens and ones, and you will regroup if necessary. Remember, boys and girls, when I said regroup, when you get 10 tenths, you would trade that in. Next, we have 3 tenths plus 8 tenths. Well, we know that we get 11 tenths. Remember, boys and girls, once we get more than 10 tenths, we're going to trade for, or we regroup. So now it says, boys and girls, we have 2 ones plus 1 1 plus the 1 regroup 1, which was this one over here, gives us 4 ones. So now, boys and girls, if we look here on the side, we can record what we did. We had 5 hundredths plus 2 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 3 tenths plus 8 tenths, 11 tenths. And you can see that's our visual regrouping of our tenths. Then we have our ones. 1 plus 2 ones plus 1 1 is 4 ones. And I placed the decimal point where it was in the original problem. So now, boys and girls, it says draw a quick drawing to make sure that your answer makes sense. So you'll see here, boys and girls, I'm going to draw the first, which was 2 3/5 hundredths, as 2 ones, 3 tenths. Actually, I think I want to make sure that those are a different color so they pop a little bit more. 3 tenths and 5 ones. Now we're going to take that and we're going to add that, boys and girls, to 1 82 hundredths. So 1 8 tenths and, last but not least, 2 hundredths. So now, boys and girls, and when we look at this and we see here, we did some regrouping. We took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 tenths, and when we traded that 10 tens, we got our original 3 ones plus an additional 4th one. Now, boys and girls, we see that if we counted up our leftover hundreds, we're good to go. We have our answer. 4 1/10, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hundredths. So 4 17 centimeters of rain fell. So since 4 17 centimeters is close to the estimate of 4, we know that our answer is reasonable. So that's why it's important to estimate to check the reasonableness of our answer. So boys over here and girls, we have this math talk which says, explain how you know when you need to regroup in a decimal addition problem. Boys and girls, remember, these tens here represent dimes. Once you get 10 dimes, you could trade it in for $1. So you could say that I know that we need to regroup when I have more than 9 hundredths or 9 tenths. So whenever you have more than 9 hundredths or 9 tenths, you know that, boys and girls, you regroup. And it's just like this. If we have 10 pennies, we would regroup for $1. If we had 9 hundredths, well, this would be 9 dimes. 9 dimes we trade for $1. And if we had 9 pennies, we would trade for, if we got 10 pennies, we would trade for 1/10. So now, boys and girls, we have one more problem to do, which deals with equivalent decimals. It says, when adding decimals, you can use equivalent decimals to help keep the numbers aligned in each place. Add zeros to the right of the last digit as needed so that the add-ins, which is just a fancy word for the two numbers you add together, have the same number of decimal places. Try this. Estimate the sum and then find the difference. So we estimated 2 and 4 tenths to be 20, 13 and 76 hundredths to be 14. And just as a quick reminder, boys and girls, we underlined the ones place and we looked over at the tens place. We saw a 7 there. Well, because 7 is greater than 5, we know that this 3 is going to be rounded to 14. So if we add 10 plus 14, we get 34. So our estimate is 34. Our actual answer should be very close to that. So now, boys and girls, what we're going to do is we are going to add the two numbers. If you look down here, you can see that it was 20 and 4 tenths plus 13 and 76 hundredths. Remember, they said to add a 0 so that the place value looks the same. This is important just for helping you keep everything in order. So over here in step 2, it says find the sum. Add the hundredths first. Now this is where we added that 0. The 0 doesn't change the value of it. However, visually it helps your brain keep things in order. 0 plus 6 is 6. 4 plus 7 is 11. And we're going to have to regroup because we're going to get 1 out of that. So then we have 0 plus 3 is 3 plus 1 is 4. And then 2 plus 1 is 3. So boys and girls, when we look at our sum, we see our sum is 34 and 16 hundredths. So let's think to ourselves, boys and girls. 34 and 16 hundredths, is that close to our estimate of 34? Yeah, it is pretty close. So we know that our answer, 34 and 16 hundredths, is very reasonable. Also, boys and girls, when we look, boys and girls, we know that our answer is pretty reasonable. It says, so down here, boys and girls, it says, is your answer reasonable? What we can say is, yes, it is, because 34 and 16 hundredths is close to 34. And boys and girls, just to recap here, remember, we rounded to the nearest ones place here. We underlined the 3 and we did the arrow next door and we saw that there was a 7 there. We saw that 7 is greater than 5, so we rounded this to be 14. Now, boys and girls, the problems here are pretty straightforward, but I wanted to make sure why it's important to remember to line up the place values. So whenever you have two numbers, so say if we had this number plus this number, we know that if we were to write this out, it's 3 and 4 tenths, and then 3 and 14 hundredths. We always want to make sure that we place a 0 if we need to. A 0 is just a placeholder. It doesn't change the value of the decimal, but visually it's easier for our eyes to see that it's 0 plus 4 hundredths would give us 4 hundredths. So boys and girls, remember, whenever you're doing any sort of problem, and if you see that you have to line up by the place value, you know that it would be 3 and 37 hundredths plus 3 and 712 thousandths. Now here in this case, boys and girls, we see that there is nothing in this place value. However, we know that visually, our eye would like to see that there's a 0 there. We know that there are 0 thousands, so we know we're going to add 0 thousands to 2 thousands and get 2 thousands.